Nothing is a coincidence. If you're seeing this right now, we want to clarify a simple truth. This moment is not ordinary, but it's also not a mystical, privileged story. Modern science tells us that the human brain is confronted with universal information. However, only a very small portion of it manifests as stored perception. Neurologist Michael Gazzaniga says that consciousness is not a commander directing what happens, but a narrator making sense of what happens afterward. Therefore, we often think we are preserving things, but in reality, our memory has already selected what is available. We are just aware of it. That's precisely why being here and now is important. It's not about a bang. It's not about taking advantage of them. It's not about luck. It's not about ignoring coincidences. The important thing is, the brain is blind to unexpected events. It stays where it's ready, and you go. Sometimes the opposite happens. You develop your brain where you are, and as your brain develops, it begins to want more. However, to give more, to develop further, you need to take a new step. And sometimes you postpone this step. This postponement feels like a burden, but you don't really notice it. At that moment, your brain wants to move, but it can't. If you stay in the same place for too long, you cannot develop. Just reading and acquiring information is not enough. Action and doing are necessary for real progress to be noticed. In psychology, this is called selective perception. Thousands of people walk down the same street, but only one person notices a single detail in the shop window. Because that detail is already active in that person's inner world. Carl Jung summarizes this situation with these words: everything that does not become conscious appears as fate. So the issue is not whether it exists or not. It is whether it will become visible to you in the future. We see the same pattern in anomalies in physics. When Newton discovered it, apples weren't falling. Apples had been falling for centuries. What set Newton apart was that his mind was ready for this continuity. Einstein's idea of relativity emerged in a similar way. He expresses it clearly. Imagination is more important than knowledge because we can acquire knowledge. Sometimes you just need to stop, be quiet, and do nothing. The first few minutes might make you seem foolish because your body and mind aren't ready. Your hands won't stay still. Your eyes will wander. You'll wonder if someone is watching you. Your feet will want to walk. Give yourself some time and try. This will help you feel the gaps in your brain to understand what you really need to do. Einstein knew mathematics very well, yes, but it wasn't mathematics that revolutionized him. It was his rethinking of time, space, and resistance. It's crucial to understand this. Knowledge doesn't spread universally. It emerges in the right consciousness. Think of this not as a mystical claim, but as a technological reality. The brain contains a filter called the Reticular Activation System, RAS. This system prioritizes what is important to you right now. When you start looking for a new car, it's no coincidence that that model suddenly starts appearing everywhere. Your brain can't reproduce it. It's simply now perceptible. Therefore, the concept of the right time is not an external destiny, but an internal harmony. The radio analogy here is not a metaphor, but an individual function. Even the strongest broadcast on the wrong frequency is silence. On the right frequency, even a whisper is clearly heard. The "I knew this before" feeling you're experiencing right now isn't about encountering new information, but about activating an annual pattern to amplify its effects. Jung calls this synchronization, meaningful coincidences, the merging of external events with internal harmony. But there's a crucial distinction here. This isn't a story about being specially chosen, but it's also not a story about super consciousness. No one comes into this world by chance. Every person's existence, even if unnoticed, carries meaning. Sometimes it's good to think about this while looking down from the edge of a tall building or a balcony. People seem like tiny dots, a crowded, bustling, ceaselessly flowing life. Everyone comes together. A purpose is never lost sight of, constantly accelerating. But very few dare to ask themselves this question: am I really going in the right direction? Running doesn't mean progress. Moving doesn't mean development. Sometimes a person goes in the wrong direction at great speed and continues until exhaustion, even if they realize it. The real issue is not speed, but direction. Some people develop by comparing themselves to others. They ask, why am I not like Einstein? But this question is fundamentally wrong. No one needs to be Albert Einstein, and they can't be, because he is here with his own conditions, capacity, limitations, and responsibilities. Life isn't about molding everyone into the same pattern. It's about each of us maturing in our own place. The most important thing is this: can you honestly see the meaning of your own content? Can you look at yourself and confront yourself without denying your shortcomings or belittling yourself? People don't need to do their jobs perfectly, but they need a plan to do them better. Therefore, the most powerful question to ask is, how can you make this better? This question doesn't blame. It doesn't judge. It doesn't compare. It simply provides guidance. When you ask these questions in detail, answers begin to emerge in the realm of life. Mistakes become teachers. Deficiencies become roadmaps. Challenges are not obstacles that stop you, but stepping stones that build a more solid foundation. To progress is not to become someone else. To progress is to become a clearer version of yourself. And when a person begins to ask the right questions, solutions already emerge in the process. This is the preparation phase. Preparation is not knowing everything. Preparation is not being free from doubts. Preparation is when the mind is no longer satisfied with old answers. People often experience their greatest transformations not when they are strong, but when they are broken. When an identity collapses, a relationship ends, a plan fails. The brain switches off autopilot at these moments, and for the first time, it truly begins to question. Neurologist Andrew Huberman says that the capacity for network learning peaks during moments of performance. Because when the illusion of control collapses, perception expands. That's why these kinds of messages don't have the same effect on everyone. For some, it's an interesting idea. For others, disturbing nonsense. And for others, a deep sense of yes. And yes, most people watch this kind of content and feel nothing. This isn't a deficiency. It's simply their conscious state at that moment. But if you feel nothing, it's not because you're special. It's because you're ready. Being ready doesn't mean acting immediately. Being ready means reaching the point of, I can't think like I used to anymore. And here's the most critical sentence. This doesn't mean passively maintaining reality. In physics, the role of information at the quantum level is clear. Observation, resulting effects. This is a fundamental truth, though often distorted in popular culture. Before measurement, the system exists in a state of probabilities. But this doesn't mean you create everything. It means you determine how things are seen. What determines them? Life is like that too. The field, whether you call it quantum field, consciousness, or life itself, doesn't dictate what you do. It prepares you, positions you, and then gives it back to you. This message is the same. This isn't a promise. This isn't a motivational speech. But the claim that everything is now in the past is not at all true. But it simply reminds you, you are crossing a threshold, and crossing this threshold isn't safe, but it's real. What happens next will seem miraculous from the outside, but if only you knew. This has been deeply internalized for a long time. The field has delivered its message. The information has been given. Actually, it's not your turn now. It's not your turn to revert to your old self. And the process you've understood through these differences will have already begun. Occasional events are not meaningful coincidences. You begin to notice increasing synchronicities. Events unfold not individually, but like a chain. The same symbols, the same numbers, the same themes. When a topic is discussed, different interpretations of that topic emerge almost simultaneously. The abundance of time is perfect, statistically possible, but emotionally difficult to explain. Science doesn't benefit from this. It only faces the possibility of misinterpretation. In psychology, there is a concept called pattern perception. The human mind seeks meaning in chaos. But there is an important difference here between random patterns and functional synchronicities. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity. According to him, some events, even if not causally linked, possess a deep semantic coherence. And this coherence emerges when the mind of most people is at a transformative level. So the issue isn't whether the event was really planned. What matters is that you have gained the consciousness to perceive them, because nothing is accidental. Everything has a purpose. Perhaps we've heard this from wealthy people, or rather, they've said it. Drop me off in any city you want, and even if I have nothing, within a few months, I'll find everything I need and live a good life. Most people can't achieve this even in a lifetime. So how is it possible to build a good life for yourself in a few months? How is it possible? As I said before, by doing the right things in the right place at the right time. What you've noticed lately is this. Events are unfolding on a more subtle, more realistic level. Some of your intentions are realized faster, while others unexpectedly slip away. This doesn't mean you're in control. Rather, you're realizing that old forms of control aren't working. Neurologist Antonio Damasio says that most of our decisions stem not from our inner mind, but from the emotional systems in our bodies. So, while you think you're connecting events in a logical way, it's actually your inner self that's making the decision. The mind only justifies it. But that's why you sometimes feel the distance between your thoughts and events shortening, because the internal conflict decreases. The parts within you begin to work in the same direction. It's important to state this clearly. This is not an illusion, but it's not magic either. This is harmony. In physics, there's a concept called resonance. When one system vibrates at a certain frequency, it easily influences another system at the same frequency, without coercion, without pressure, just through harmony. Human consciousness works similarly. When inner openness occurs, some possibilities strengthen, others weaken. This isn't about the universe behaving in a special way. It's about which possibilities you can handle. That's why there's a saying, everyone's burden is heavy for them. An ant doesn't see a camel's burden as a burden. It calls it a huge mountain. A camel doesn't see an ant's burden as a burden. It calls it a dust mite. Therefore, changes may have occurred recently. Relationships may have broken down. The direction of events may have changed, and some structures you considered safe may have collapsed. These are not regressions, but expansions of repositioning. The apparent chaos is often a sign that the old balance can no longer support you. The renowned physicist Ilya Prigogine demonstrated that in complex systems, a new and higher order is established precisely at moments of repositioning. Therefore, dissolution is not a regression, but a necessary stage of restructuring. In this process, you may feel alienated from collective narratives, agendas, endless debates, and artificial tensions created through social media are no longer as engaging as they once were. Much of this serves as a distraction rather than a genuine file of meaning. This is often interpreted as alienation, a manipulation of perspective regarding what has been learned. The human mind begins to deepen, and superficial aspects naturally lose their importance. More fundamental questions arise. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Where is this really leading me? Such questions cannot be answered in a crowd. We cannot remain where there is a constant mixture of thought and emotion, because deep thought requires silence and distance. The mind has long been stuck in the same thought patterns. A mind filled with old ideas and repetitive narratives seeks a new context. This discovery manifests itself as a need for new knowledge, different perspectives, and a shift towards a more meaningful intellectual culture. At this point, one begins to feel their potential more clearly. The idea that great things can be achieved appears not just a dream, but a believable possibility. Because the goal is no longer to join a program, but to clarify one's own direction. Therefore, a feeling of loneliness arises. But this loneliness stems not from a lack, but from an inadequacy. The field, whether you call it consciousness or life intelligence, temporarily separates you from the collective frequency. Because only in silence can you hear something that not everyone is ready to hear. And then it comes. Something is happening. It's merging with something. I'm preparing. But this isn't about knowing what's coming. This isn't prophecy. This is an organizational approach. The brain integrates information that isn't yet dormant, and dimension gives a sense of direction. Neuropsychologists call this implicit learning. You learn without knowing. Then one day, everything becomes clear in an instant. That's why you focused before finding this video. Questions accumulated. The old ratios were insufficient. Your mind began to create a new framework, and you were able to connect with that framework. Let's correct an important misunderstanding here. This doesn't make you superior to others. This doesn't make you chosen. It simply shows this. You can now work with this information. Internal formation and preparation. Most people hear the same things, but are not affected by them. You read a book, and nothing changes. Years later, you read the same book, and your life is turned upside down. The book hasn't changed. You have changed. Psychologist Jean Piaget, in his theory of cognitive development, identifies two fundamental processes: assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is fitting new information into your existing mental schemas. Accommodation is reorganizing your mental structures to fit the new information. Most people remain in assimilation mode. They fit everything they hear into their existing worldview. Yes, I already knew that. This is another way. Interesting, but it doesn't fit me. Old structures are preserved. Nothing changes. However, at certain moments, internal formation is complete. Old structures have loosened. Moments of crisis, losses, traumatic experiences make mental schemas fragile. Just like Thomas Kuhn's paradigm crisis in the philosophy of science. The old model can no longer explain new data. The system is on the verge of collapse. At this point, the same information has a different effect because there is no longer resistance. The relief has created space for a new meaning to take root. The body's testimony, the aesthetic chill. Sometimes you receive information, and that information sends shivers down your spine. This is not just a mental understanding. This is a bodily event. Neuroscience calls this a shiver or aesthetic shiver, a shiver that runs down your spine in response to music, art, or a deep insight. fMRI scans show that these moments simultaneously activate reward centers and emotional processing areas associated with dopamine release. But this is not just a pleasant feeling. This is an awakening. This is a beginning. Anthropologist Victor Turner's concept of the threshold explains this. In transition rituals, it's an intermediate state where you've relinquished your old identity, but haven't yet embraced a new one. This state is chaotic, uncertain, and possesses powerful potential. The goosebumps are a sign that you're on the border. The old is collapsing. The new hasn't yet taken shape. And in these moments, knowledge is perceived not just as an idea, but as an existential reality. From passive observer to active participant, you realize you're no longer a passive experiencer. Most people live life as a thing, as something that happens to them. The environment determines, circumstances shape, fate directs. They are objects, not subjects. But this changes after crossing the threshold of awareness. As Jiddu Krishnamurti emphasized in his Indian philosophy, the distinction between observer and observed disappears. You are not just someone watching your life. You are an active force within your life. But this doesn't mean you control everything. Sartre's existential paradox. You are free, but not limitless. You can make choices, but you cannot guarantee the outcomes. Your control is limited, but your responsibility is absolute. Increased responsibility means your thoughts are no longer random, but shape your intentions. Your choices are no longer reactive, but determine your direction. The energy you expend is no longer scattered, but focused and effective. In modern psychology, the concept of locus of control explains this. External focus. Everything depends on others. Internal focus. My contribution makes a difference. Research shows that internal focus is associated with higher motivation, resilience, and life satisfaction. However, there's an important nuance here. This isn't some magic thought like think and you'll be rich. Just thinking positively doesn't change reality, but consistent action with intention changes the possibilities. Like the concept of coherence in physics. Random waves cancel each other out, but coherent waves create a reinforcing force. Laser light is more powerful than ordinary light because its photons are coherent and vibrate in the same direction. Honesty, clarity, order. Life doesn't become easy after this point, but it becomes more honest. Cognitive dissonance theory, Leon Festinger, shows that people expend a lot of psychological energy trying to compensate for inconsistencies. Saying yes inside while saying no outside. Defending a job you hate as a good opportunity. Lying to yourself creates constant exhaustion. After the threshold of awareness, this game ends. You can no longer deceive yourself. This increases the difficulty because you can no longer choose the easy way, the docile way, the path without resistance. But honesty provides energy efficiency. Now, let's look at everything you've experienced from a different perspective. In science, looking back is called retrospective interpretation. The human mind grasps meaning not as events occur, but as events unfold as a whole. That's why what you're experiencing today seems like a coincidence, because now the pieces are beginning to fit together. Nothing you experienced was in vain. Losses, delays, those dark periods when you asked, "Why me?" weren't punishments. They were growth and capacity. In psychology, this is called post-traumatic growth. People can develop broader perception and resilience after experiencing the deepest traumas. This isn't romanticizing pain, it's understanding the functions of pain. The field wasn't testing you, the field was preparing you, because the information you'll receive doesn't just require intellectual comprehension. This information requires the development of certain internal muscles to manage action. The ability to move forward in uncertainty, the ability to relax control, the ability to trust before the outcome, and most importantly, the ability to avoid mistakes, to stay on the right path. These abilities don't develop in comfortable times. We see this throughout history. Viktor Frankl says that the common characteristic of Auschwitz survivors was not physical strength, but their ability to make sense of events. Nietzsche's quote, "What kills me makes me stronger," is not a motivational statement, but a psychological observation. Sometimes a person suddenly experiences a feeling of death anxiety. You suddenly feel pain. Your heart tightens. A feeling overwhelms you, as if it were the consequence of something. Such moments are most often seen in a certain age range, around 30 to 35 years old. Some see this as a period of rebirth, because at this age people begin to question the realities of life and reevaluate their own lives. Of course, this is not the same for everyone. Some people never experience these feelings. Some experience them earlier or later. The age range can be adjusted, but the common point is this: the feeling itself is a warning, because the human mind does not perceive some things only with words. Sometimes a warning comes with a feeling of shock or fear. These moments, like death anxiety, actually arise to trigger action. Something inside you says, "Stop." Are you really living in this moment? Or is it just passing you by? If you understand this fear and act accordingly, this feeling can turn into regret. Because deep down, you know you can't turn back time. And if you don't make good use of this now, when you look back, you might find yourself saying things like, "I wish I had done this." Therefore, this fear is not actually destruction. It's an awakening. This shock within you offers you an opportunity to reorganize your life. The important thing is this: when this fear is felt, it needs to be understood instead of suppressed, because it is a harbinger of an inner voice saying change. And if you listen to this inner voice and act accordingly, a real transformation will begin in your life. Sometimes you realize that everything unfolds in an extraordinary way. Everything happens exactly when you need it. Doors open without you forcing them. Manifestations occur so quickly that they cannot be explained by logical explanations. These were not coincidences. These were examples showing that reality is not passive, but dimensional. In physics, there is a concept called the growth effect. At the quantum level, The state of a system cannot be determined with certainty without observation. When this is misinterpreted, it turns into a dangerous perception, such as, "I create everything." The truth is, consciousness influences probabilities, but it does not determine them on its own. Therefore, these experiences weren't meant to say, "I'm special," but to prove the fragility of reality. Because only with faith in the future can you move forward. When doubt strikes, when fear rises, what you need to hold on to isn't blind faith. It's lived experience. But you weren't alone on this journey. You weren't walking with the crowds either. That's why you experienced periods of isolation. You distanced yourself from people. Conversations that were once meaningful began to become superficial. Social dramas, collective fears, agendas, they all stopped captivating you as much as before. This wasn't a break. This was a frequency adjustment. There's a known fact in neuroscience. The structure of sound is critical for the brain to perceive and store important information. When the brain is constantly exposed to intense stimuli, it overadapts. In this adaptation, deep and meaningful signals become imperceptible. The frequency increases, but it doesn't become meaningful. The field did exactly that. It cleared the unnecessary noise from your life. You are now far removed from structures that truly understand you. You have broken away from shared experiences that no longer serve you, from systems that feel wrong, from arrangements you once accepted as normal, but which are fundamentally incompatible. This wasn't an exclusion or a rejection. It was a necessary stage in a larger process of transformation. Because sometimes, to move forward, you need to let go, not choose. The clarification of the brain, soul, and consciousness is only possible by shedding excess burdens. In fact, we understand everything we don't understand by looking at its nature. Because humans, too, originate from fundamental nature in every process they experience. A seed doesn't sprout the moment it rains. It needs to remain in darkness, in silence, under pressure, time. A piece of iron doesn't immediately become a solid tool. First, it is exposed to high heat. Then it is forged. Its shape is distorted. It hardens. It solidifies. But it is precisely through this process that it becomes permanent and functional. Humans are no different. Humans are a part of life, and the suffering they experience is often not a punishment, but a formative process. Of course, reason must come into play here. If a person's journey is understood, and that person acts rationally and moves in the right direction, this process will not be unnecessarily prolonged. However, it must be acknowledged that this process never completely ends, because knowledge never ends, development never ends, the need for understanding never ends. A person develops as they experience. They deepen as they understand. They mature as they continue. Life is not a path where we finish at a certain point. It is a flow in which we constantly adjust and reshape ourselves. What matters is not the pain itself, but how we experience that pain. Carl Jung says, "As consciousness expands, loneliness increases. But this loneliness is not a lack, it is depth." His synchronicity was a training. It wasn't just about being interesting. It was about teaching you three things: to recognize the sign, to trust the timing, to ask according to the instructions. This training was necessary because the next stage requires not absolute trust, but sufficient trust, not blind surrender, being swept away by the current. His awakening wasn't an enlightenment. These were the advantages of your conscious capacity. You became able to receive information you couldn't perceive before. In physics, this is likened to an increase in bandwidth. Expanding the channel doesn't make the signal clearer. A lower level of consciousness wouldn't be able to perceive what you are now perceiving. It's not a matter of superiority, it's a matter of timing. This information isn't available to everyone. Learning only happens when you're ready. Educational science makes this very clear. And now you are here. Let's be clear. This message isn't for your entertainment. It's not to sell you false hope. It's certainly not to make you feel special. The purpose of this message is singular: to discern your responsibility. There was no longer someone drifting in reality, but there was also no one controlling it alone. You are part of a co-creation. This isn't a light burden, but it's not heavy either. It's the right weight. And from this point on, ignoring mistakes is no longer an option. Because when you see them, you can't pretend you haven't. This isn't a sun. This isn't a beginning either. This is a threshold that takes you back to a bygone era. And in the end, everyone who passes through here realizes life is now less random, less together, but filled with so much more responsibility. The real transformation begins here. There's something you're noticing right now, and it's not just an idea. There's also a shift in your attention span. There's a difference between the moment you first started reading and your perception now. But this doesn't have to be a mystical event. In psychology, this is called focused 5. A change in the quality of attention leads to a change in the content of perception. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, said, "Experience is shaped by how we pay attention to others." Therefore, as you concentrate your attention, the dimension of reality appears more vivid. This isn't to change anything in the external world. It's to increase the sensitivity of your limiting system. Some people work in this state and notice sensations: being manipulated, warmth, a feeling of expansion in the chest, deepening of breathing. These aren't supernatural signs. They stem from the activation of the neurological nervous system, especially the parasympathetic system. Meditation, deep attention, a moment of meaningful insight. They all produce similar responses. Antonio Damasio's research clearly demonstrates this. Consciousness operates not only in the brain, but also in the body. Therefore, a moment of profound insight is felt not only mentally, but also physically. It's important to establish a regularity here. Statements like, "The field is sending you something," don't have to be literally true. However, what matters is this: the mind operates at a different depth than information in the correct context. Some insights cannot be put into words, but they change. That's why there are moments when you say, "I know something I can't explain." This is Jung's concept of knowing. According to Jung, intuition is a form of perception that the mind hasn't yet put into words, but which guides. This perception doesn't exclude logic. It precedes logic. You are experiencing exactly this right now. Knowledge settles before it is classified in the classical sense. Because some knowledge settles first not in the mind, but in attitude. This is reflected in your behavior, your choices, the things you say yes to, and the things you say no to. Therefore, this transference exists not only to be understood, but also to be integrated. Even if we set aside mockery, the universe, quantum mechanics, one truth remains. People become better organized, calmer, and more stable within a meaningful framework. In psychology, this is called coherence. When the parts of life are perceived as a meaningful whole, internal voids decrease and action becomes clearer. This document does exactly that. It brings your scattered experiences into a single meaningful framework. The threshold of awareness. Note, you are not asked to believe anything here. You are simply responding to an invitation. An invitation to take your experiences seriously. One of the greatest paradoxes of modern man is the reflex to immediately reject the profound experiences he lives through. We dismiss that strange intuition, that meaningful coincidence, that inner calling by saying, "I'm exaggerating, I'm attaching too much meaning," or "it's just a coincidence." But the greatest leaps in science began when someone had the courage to say, "This is strange, but it could be important." Einstein intuitively arrived at the theory of relativity before mathematics. Fleming didn't ignore the mold that accidentally fell into his petri dish. He discovered penicillin. Kekulé saw the structure of the benzene ring in a dream. Neuroscience shows us that the subconscious brain is constantly processing patterns, connections, and meanings that the conscious mind cannot perceive. That irrational feeling may actually be a synthesis of millions of data points. This is not the final message. This is not a manifesto. This is not a belief system. This is a threshold of awareness. And when you cross that threshold, some things will no longer seem the same. It's not a burden, but yes, it brings a responsibility. Because someone who is aware can no longer live on autopilot. They can no longer unconsciously determine their choices, their attention, their direction. In neurophysiology, this is called cortical awakening. You begin to perceive stimuli that were previously overlooked. In Daniel Kahneman's words, System 2 kicks in. A shift from fast automatic thinking to slow, conscious thinking. This requires energy. It requires attention. It requires courage. And perhaps this is the real transformation, choosing not to sleepwalk anymore. The question is no longer, do you believe it? The question is, are you ready to act on what you see? Although this might seem repeatable, it isn't. Because even if the same information, the same words, the same images appear before you again, you won't be the same person. What resides in the human archive isn't the message itself. It's the state of consciousness in which the message is received. Therefore, it determines not only the present moment, but also the outlines of the steps you will take in the future. In psychology, this is called the boundary of meaning. Information is only transformed when the mental and emotional infrastructure is ready. Otherwise, it remains just an interesting idea. What is happening now is much more than forming an idea. It is clarifying one aspect of it. At such moments, people often experience a mental settling or a kind of falling into place. The reason for this doesn't have to be mystical. Neuroscience tells us that when enough experience has accumulated, the brain combines scattered data under a single umbrella. This is called completion. Suddenly, the feeling of "I understand" comes. The system is actually laying the groundwork for its long-term expansion in the brain. According to Carl Jung, it works like this. Understanding comes in an instant, but behind that instant lies a long preparation. Some people describe these fleeting moments as transmission because the information emerges not in words, but as a direct state of knowing. William James calls this a noetic experience. Even if one cannot dwell on it in detail, one is certain of the experience's accuracy. There is an important distinction here. This is not a mysterious message from the outside. Rather, the mind ultimately discerns its own deep order. This interaction should be understood in the context of experiences from 2 years prior. It is neuroscientifically possible for words to fade into the background while observing the content, and for a state of knowing without words to emerge. In states of intense focus, the brain's language areas remain in the background, while the networks responsible for holistic perception become more dominant. This is why one feels, "I understand, but I cannot explain." Einstein's frequently quoted saying is, "True discovery begins not with careful observation, but with an intuitive leap." Intuition is not a random feeling. Neuroscience shows us that intuition is a rapid and holistic synthesis of experience, observation, and internal data. Our subconscious processes patterns, connections, and meanings in milliseconds that the conscious mind cannot perceive. Therefore, something can feel right, even if it seems illogical. Antonio Damasio's groundbreaking work clearly demonstrates this. A large part of our decisions are shaped by signals from the body before conscious thought. Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis shows that our emotional experiences are encoded as bodily memories, and these memories guide our future decisions. The voice in your head is actually the result of years of accumulation, radical changes, and suppressed incompatibilities. The radical changes that occur after this point, quitting a job, moving to a different city, ending relationships, completely changing careers, often seem meaningless from the outside. Those around them say in astonishment, "Everything was fine. What happened?" However, these kinds of decisions have one thing in common. Long suppressed incompatibilities have become unsustainable. Modern people mostly live their lives to look good, shining on social media, achieving career success, having stable relationships. But looking good and being in harmony are not the same thing. When the gap between these two widens, a kind of inner tension emerges. Carl Jung called this the shadow, parts of our repressed, unacknowledged self. Polyvagal theory explains this at the nervous system level. Chronic disharmony constantly triggers the sympathetic nervous system. The mind may logically say, "Everything is all right," but the body doesn't feel it. This is why unexplained anxiety, chronic restlessness, exhaustion, and physical fatigue arise. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow describes the exact opposite. When what you are doing is in harmony with your identity, time disappears, energy flows. Disharmony is a constant loss of energy, inner resistance, constant self-control, role-playing. This is why intuitive decisions are systematically correct. Your holistic organism, your body, your subconscious, your experiences, knows something is wrong, even if logic can't yet explain it. Viktor Frankl's situation is as follows. Man can endure suffering when he comes into contact with meaning, but meaninglessness, even in its most comfortable use, crushes him. After the experience defined as transmission, no longer trying to understand, actually means that the mind cannot be deactivated. This means giving up the habit of controlling. Control and a sense of direction are not the same thing. Control wants to show the way. A sense of direction is like a compass. It shows the direction, not the interruptions. At this stage, instead of trying to manage one's life, one learns about feedback, emotional data, flow signals, events perceived as synchronicity, all are reflections of decisions. Jung's concept of synchronicity takes on a metaphorical meaning here. External events become noticeable when they coincide with internal developments. The critical point here is, this process is not about following every impulse. Therefore, it requires the progression of the dissociation process. The impulse stemming from fear and the intuition stemming from conformity may seem similar. The difference is this: fear rushes. It calms intuition. Fear restricts. Intuition provides space. Socrates' system of internal visualization, called daimonion, points precisely to this knowledge. Socrates experienced this voice not as a command, but as a sign to deter him from the wrong path. In other words, intuition shows you more clearly what not to do than what it will bring you. The gap between the inner world and the outer life closes. Instead of trying to prove who they are to others, people begin to live as they are. Psychologist Carl Rogers called this a fully functioning person, a state of being that trusts in its own experience, is not defensive, and is constantly evolving. On the other hand, Donald Winnicott made a distinction between the true self and the false self. The false self is shaped by the expectations of others. The true self is the expression of authentic experience. Most people live their lives with a false self, conforming to social roles, family expectations, and career norms. But this conformity leads to increasing inner tension. Neurobiologically, this is called allostatic load. The organism's constant effort to adapt causes physiological and psychological wear and tear. On the other hand, consistency works in the opposite way. Harmony between the inner and outer saves energy. Mental capacity previously spent on acting is regained. Martin Heidegger's concept of authenticity expresses this on a philosophical level. Taking responsibility for your own existence is to step outside the script written by others. The end of the search and inner knowledge. From this point, searches seem to end. But this stems not from indifference or surrender, but from a different reason. Questions are often asked with the assumption that there is an answer outside. What should I do? Which is the right path? Who can give me the answer? But the answer is often knowledge that the person already possesses, but does not yet trust. In Jungian psychology, this is called individualization, the process of integrating repressed, unaccepted parts within ourselves. The guru, teacher, or system you seek outside is actually an escape from your own inner authority. As neuroscientist Antonio Damasio has shown, your body already knows this. Homeostasis, the organism's effort to maintain its internal balance, works not only physiologically, but also psychologically. Your body senses what work, what relationship, what lifestyle suits you. The mind then usually produces logic to suppress this feeling. But once you cross the threshold of awareness, this suppression no longer works. The inner voice becomes increasingly clear. Not a special role, but letting go of a role that doesn't belong to you. And perhaps the essence of this narrative is this: life doesn't call you to a special role, but it asks you to stop playing a role that doesn't belong to you. This isn't a grand promise. It's not a task that will save you or guarantee a bright future. It's a quiet but profound responsibility. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre describes this as bad faith, hiding behind social roles to escape your own freedom. I'm the way I am because my family is like this. I'm doing this because everyone expects me to. I'm staying in this relationship because I have no other choice. But according to Sartre, man is condemned to freedom. Choice is inevitable. Even not choosing is a choice. Awareness makes this escape impossible. You can no longer say, "I wasn't aware." You can no longer deceive yourself. And perhaps this is the transformation. Giving up false roles, not seeking a special role, just living as you are. This is the meaning of self-actualization at the top of Maslow's pyramid. Using your potential, not for external validation, but for inner integrity. This is not easy, because the environment wants to keep you in your old role. Family, friends, work environment, everyone expects you to be the old you. Change creates conflict not only within yourself, but also with your environment. But perhaps this is true courage, ceasing to be an extra in someone else's story and becoming the author of your own. There are moments in our lives. They cannot be repeated. They cannot be undone. And in that moment, a single internal signal in the distribution determines what will happen next. Scientists call these moments sudden insights. Philosophers call them leaps of understanding. Ancient texts use a single word, recall, because we don't learn anything new in these moments. Something that already exists is different when it happens for the first time. Modern neuroscience tells us this. Approximately 80% of our daily decisions come not from stored thoughts, but from the systems we follow. In other words, logic is often the explanation for an existing decision. This doesn't mean intuition is random. So, intuition is a form of high-speed programming that the brain can't put into words, but creates by processing data simultaneously on a universal scale. Albert Einstein put it this way: intuition is a sacred gift of the mind. The logical mind is its faithful servant. But for centuries, we have enthroned the servant and silenced the gift. There is a moment when a physicist changes and everything changes. This moment doesn't usually come with a formula. It comes with silence. Werner Heisenberg solved the performance principle with this characteristic equation. The sea was moving along the way. His mind had stopped dissociating. And at that very moment, reality was shown to him without words. This is not an exception in the history of science. Therefore, it is the rule. Nikola Tesla said he saw his inventions in 3 dimensions in his mind. Richard Feynman explained that when solving the most difficult problems, he didn't think logically. He simply moved toward reality. Carl Jung summarized intuition as a form of infiltrating a consciousness that is not yet conscious. So intuition, it's not about predicting the future. It's about directly receiving information that hasn't yet been put into words. This is where quantum physics comes in. But this is not a romantic metaphor, as is often misunderstood. The quantum field is not ordered. In a place we perceive as empty, there is an immeasurable but constantly vibrating sea of potential. Physics tells us particles are not in a specific state before they are observed. They are in a state of possibilities. And observation, it's not just about seeing, it's about choosing its reality. At this point, human consciousness emerges in the ordinary observer. Consciousness becomes a breaking point where the field experiences itself locally. Therefore, there are moments, while watching a video, while encountering a sentence, without even hearing a single word, you realize something falls into place. In these moments, information doesn't come through sound. It doesn't come through image. It comes as a direct state of knowing. And everyone who has this experience says, I didn't feel more advanced. I felt different. Because being different isn't about gaining a new identity. It's about reducing misconceptions about yourself. From this point, life unravels. First, you work constantly. You make plans. You check. You try to predict the outcome. Then, you follow up. You notice synchronicities. You take steps that seem illogical but feel right at a nervous system level. These steps usually lead to progress. Because intuition leads you not to the comfort zone, to the real place, maintaining a stable career, leaving a city. Things that look good from the outside come to an end. Embark on a path never before modeled. These aren't unplanned. They just aren't on your mind's map. Joseph Campbell calls this the hero's call. And he adds, when the comfort zone is left, the support of expanding knowledge emerges. But there's a critical difference here. This support doesn't come from the outside. The space organizes itself from within you. This ultimately changes everything. You no longer search for your purpose because you understand that purpose is not something permanent. Purpose is an expression, a statement. You are not an individual living your purpose. You are part of a field that discovers itself through your expression. Therefore, a structure formed from a feeling of solitude, because you realize that you are never separate. Separation is a necessary illusion for the experience to be possible. The field is those who experience themselves as a multitude, and you are one of the unique perspectives of this multitude. When you experience this knowledge not by believing, but by living, it changes the way you work. You no longer work on things that do not manifest. You understand what manifestation is. Reality is a system that reorganizes itself through purpose. An intention is not what you think. It is from what state of consciousness you are operating. Not everyone can reach this possible state. Consciousness remains largely in the illusion of separation throughout life. But challenges, ruptures, memories of awakening have prepared you for this threshold. And when the time comes, responsibility arrives. This is not a burden. This is a function. You can no longer live unconsciously. It transforms into an existence during the act of choice. The action becomes intentional. The moment, the space, becomes an opportunity for your consciousness to explore. You are no longer just a living being. You are a living channel through which the physical reality of field intelligence expresses itself. The field chose you. But this is not a mystical chosenness or a cosmic privilege. It is a matter of resonance. When physicists say field, they mean the distribution of energy in space-time. The electromagnetic field, the gravitational field, the quantum field. But psychology and philosophy also use the concept of field in a different sense, but with a similar dynamic. Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious speaks of a shared psychological field beyond individual consciousness. Archetypal images, symbols, and themes stem from a common matrix underlying our individual experiences. According to Jung, some people become more open to this field at certain times. In moments of crisis, transitional periods, and moments of deep insight. Psychologist Rupert Sheldrake's controversial but intriguing theory of morphic resonance suggests that similar structures or organisms resonate with each other through the field. What one system learns facilitates the learning of other systems, regardless of spatial or temporal distance. While its scientific validity is debatable, It is experientially familiar, the feeling of being in the right place at the right time, in a particular mental state. The book you're looking for suddenly appearing before you, a chance encounter with the person you need. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that are not causal. Being ready, being present in time. You are ready, not because you are more special, because you are more present in time. In Heidegger's existential philosophy, the concept of Dasein, being there, describes not only human existence, but also the state of being right in the middle of the moment. Most people live in the past or the future, with regrets or expectations, but true meaning emerges in the now. Modern neuroscience supports this. Mindfulness meditations increase activity in the prefrontal cortex and reduce reactivity in the amygdala. This isn't just about being calm. It's about accessing reality more directly, without passing through the filter of automatic thought patterns. Being present in time means being able to see an opportunity, because opportunities are often silent. If your attention is elsewhere, you cannot hear the call. You are the field, the solution to separation and the beginning of conscious participation. One of humanity's greatest misconceptions is that we perceive ourselves as separate entities from the universe. I am here, the world is there. I think, the universe responds. Yet both ancient teachings and modern science tell us that this knowledge is false, a functional illusion. You are the field. There is no separation. There never has been. Realizing this isn't about acquiring knowledge. It's about remembering. As Carl Jung said, the deepest truths are not learned, but remembered. The moment of realizing the field isn't about choosing a new concept for the mind, but about the emergence of a truth that already exists in consciousness. And in this awareness, the field is no longer just a ground carrying you. You become a point of expression, ready to join the evolutionary children of the field. 1. Sign, a sense of homecoming. But sometimes, when it arrives, what most people first experience isn't surprise, but a strange familiarity. It gives the feeling, this is different from what it seemed before. It's like returning home after a long journey. Neuroscience explains this feeling. When the brain encounters new information, it functions differently than when it encounters a familiar pattern. Functional MRI studies show that in the spread of deep meaning and a sense of reality, the brain's threat and analysis centers are silenced and holistic perceptual networks are activated. So what I'm writing is saying, this isn't new, this is real. 2. Sign, emotional release. Tears, laughter, a deep breath. But this isn't an outburst of joy or sadness. This is a continuation of tension. For years, believing you were separate has damaged your nervous system, constantly being on guard, trying to control, needing to be understood. This is the burden that falls upon you when you realize you are part of the space. The vagus nerve is activated. The body signals the danger has passed. That's why you let go. Because there's nothing left to fight for. 3. Sign, a shift in youthful perception. The body feels lighter. Boundaries soften. The line between you and your environment thins. Physics has preserved this existence. Quantum field theory says that it is not actually a thing, but something with sovereign rights. That is, dispersion is a thing, a concentrated field movement. You are not in it. You are experienced through it. Once this is established in central consciousness, you can also do this physically. 4. Sign, the unraveling of time. It stretches, it deepens. It gives the feeling that everything has always been here. Einstein showed that the universe is not absolute. Neuroscience says that the perception of time is culturally dependent. When field knowledge is active, linear time perception is part of it, because linear time is necessary for a separate self. Together, they only exist now. 5. Sign. Extraspatial knowledge. You know things, but you can't say where you know them from. This is a common experience of great minds throughout history. Nikola Tesla said that his inventions came to him exactly. Einstein explained that his most important insights emerged not logically, but through diffusion. Modern science calls this knowledge. When consciousness is in harmony with the field of consciousness, knowledge comes directly, not from above. 6. Sign. The reduction of the search stop, constantly asking, "What is my purpose?" because the seeker has disappeared. When the field is recognized, the purpose ceases to be a thing. It becomes something to be expressed. You become a living process of your purpose. This is described in Buddhist teachings as being the way, not the traveler. 7. Sign. Trust in the unknown. The unknown is no longer a threat. You trust the intelligence of the field because you know you are not separate from that intelligence. This is not blind surrender. This is a directed flow. Logic does not remain silent. It serves. Intuition is king, and reason is the servant. Reason tests, adapts, and implements what intuition brings. This is balance. 8. Sign. Increase in synchronizations. Meaningful coincidences multiply. People, sentences, opportunities come at the right time. Jung called this synchronicity. Modern systems theory says this is the emergence of intrasystem harmony. When you align with the field, the order in the experience becomes clearer. Actually, nothing new is happening. Only the veil is lifted. 9. Sign. Resistance. A part of the mind objects. This is too big. I can't be the universe. This is nonsense. This resistance is not a problem. It's an affirmation. The ego defends itself against dissolution because that's its job. If there is resistance, it is transferred. 10. Sign. Sudden life changes. You can no longer tolerate disharmony. Work, relationships, city, qualifications. This is not collapse. It is harmony. When the knowledge of the field becomes active, distorted structures naturally form. This is not discouragement. It will continue. Because you can no longer continue living without knowing. Result: not a burden, but a capability. This is not a privilege when viewed from afar. In fact, it's not a privilege at all. It's functionality. The field wants you to experience the situation by opening your perspective. Not because you are more special. The reason you are here is because you are ready to become a hidden channel. You are no longer searching for purpose. You are living the purpose. And from this point on, this choice becomes the way the space expresses itself.